Greetings, listeners. My name is Ian Hunter, and I am currently studying history as an undergraduate at California State University, Fresno. As part of a course requirement on Brazilian history, I have done some research on capoeira and its implications as a form of resistance, and my plan is to explain capoeira and the history behind it, and I will also look at how this activity affects modern Brazil. Capoeira is somewhat difficult to define. Many people who are exposed to it for the first time say that it is a combination of a dance and a martial art. However, those who are more exposed to the activity, either through academic study or higher cultural awareness or actual practice, will often mention a third element of capoeira, and that it's like a game. Capoeira came about directly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. As Portuguese colonists brought Africans to Brazil to work the sugar plantations as slaves, more and more of these newly enslaved Africans felt the desire to practice self-defense tactics. Of course, slave masters didn't want their slaves to be able to practice martial arts out of fear of slave rebellion, so these activities were prohibited. Kenneth Dosar, the author of Capoeira Angola, Dancing Between Two Worlds, states that this led to the enslaved Africans inventing their own martial art based on fighting styles from Africa, and they cleverly disguised it as a type of dance. Thus, around the 17th century, capoeira was born as an act of resistance against the slaveholders of Brazil. Now, capoeira certainly was used as a form of resistance by the enslaved and fits into the definition of resistance put forth in James Scott's article entitled Everyday Forms of Resistance. Scott mentions that resistance takes many forms, including pilfering and foot dragging. And he also argues that many forms of resistance were utilized by the lower class to undermine the wishes of those in power, and that they were often disguised as other actions in order to avoid detection and punishment. And now Sophie Fugel, author of Discourses of Subversion, The Ethics and Aesthetics of Capoeira and Parkour, informs readers that after its origin, capoeira remained illegal until it was legalized by the Vargas regime in the 1930s. Since then, it has become a significant part of Brazilian culture. As distinguished capoeirista Mestre Penotti once said, capoeira is culture, not sport. So what do these capoeiristas, or people who actually practice capoeira, do? As I mentioned before, capoeira is a martial art, dance, and a game all rolled into one. And according to Ben Downing, the author of A Brief Anatomy of Capoeira, the sport involves a minimum of 5 or 6 participants and may include up to a few dozen. The players of capoeira form circles called rodas and attempt to use kicks and headbutts to knock down other participants in order to sort of dominate the circle. Players can defend themselves by dodging or blocking attacks, though blocking is seldom used among long-term players, because more skill is required to stop your attack just before hitting your opponent, and so therefore your opponent doesn't need to block. Despite being a game, which is all in good fun, there are times when participants are attempting to humiliate or even injure their opponents. And as a result of this, a senior capoeirista may kick misbehaving participants out of the game for good or give them a simple warning. But when no misbehavior interrupts the game, rodas can last for several hours depending on the skill and energy of the participants. Ben Downing informs readers that the goal of capoeira is to dominate other players and to cramp their style, as it were, sort of. This objective is similar to the main goals of the pioneers of capoeira, who were not necessarily attempting to dominate their colleagues, but to undermine the power of the slave owners by training themselves and their friends for potential rebellion. By disguising their training as simple dancing, they were able to prepare themselves for a fight against their rulers. Besides needing willing and skilled participants, music is an essential part of the sport of capoeira. Music is usually provided between 2 to 10 players of various percussion instruments, with a bow-shaped instrument called a berimbau. The rhythm of these performers starts out slowly and increases in tempo as the game goes on. The senior capoeirista sings a solo called, I will probably mispronounce this, but La Dianha, in which he praises God and asks for blessings during the upcoming match. Blessings for all the participants. The sound of the music of capoeira shows its Afro-Brazilian roots with its unique sound, as evidenced here. Katya Wesolowski, who wrote an article entitled Professionalizing Capoeira, the Politics of Play in the 21st Century Brazil, writes that in the modern day, capoeira is taught at gyms and health clubs throughout Brazil and around the world. She also states that there is a new emphasis of professionalism being placed on the sport, and that even today, capoeira represents a struggle against social inequality in Brazil. With its origins in the slave plantations of Brazil as a means of slaves for practicing martial arts, while remaining undetected, capoeira has become a significant part of Brazil's history and culture. Its main focus on music is another reason it has become so popular among the Brazilian population. Despite beginning as a secret form of resistance to slave owners, capoeira is now a large part of Brazilian culture, even for those who are not of African descent. Being a unique hybrid of sport, game, martial art, and dance, capoeira can be said to represent the diverse ethnic and cultural composition of Brazil itself. I hope this podcast has helped you learn about a little bit of Brazilian history, culture, and methods of resistance used by slaves in the Americas. Capoeira has had a significant impact on the culture and history of Brazil and is becoming more of a global activity. Perhaps someday in the future, all people can experience capoeira firsthand as the sport continues to increase in popularity. Thank you for listening.